My first prediction for Age of Annihilation has come true, which means it's time to learn how to speed paint some Heroscape miniatures. Welcome everyone! It's now a good time to start to learn how to paint Heroscape miniatures. So I set a goal for myself. I wanted to paint up the Marro Puppy Dogs, better known as the Marrden Nagrubs. I know they're in different species, but you know, they're Marro Puppy Dogs as far as I'm concerned. And my goal was to basically paint this guy as fast as possible and get a result that was comparable to the original pre-painted miniatures right here. And this is what I came up with. And with a little bit of practice, you can get this time frame down to just a bit over 15 minutes per miniature. So let's take a look at how this works now. Speed painting is all about taking a series of simple painting techniques and combining them in a way to get a good final result that also can be done fairly quickly. 15 minutes is an awfully fast time to paint a miniature. Now the tools I'm going to be using today are a dry brush. You can get one of these from any local game store. They're fairly cheap and there's different brands out there. They're all the same thing. Then I've also got an Artificer Layer extra small brush. This is a Games Workshop product and it's very expensive. It retails for about $27 to $30 US. Now, it may seem crazy to spend that much money on a brush, and you really don't have to spend that much money, but it's not a bad idea if you want to get good miniatures to buy one or two really expensive brushes. What they do is they hold their tip of the bristles together very well, and it leads to a lot less frustration when you need to control the paint on the miniatures. I'm also using a wet palette. Now this is not required for this particular painting tutorial, so if you don't have one of these things, don't worry so much about it, but they do make your life easier if you're painting miniatures. Lots of videos about them if you want to learn more about them. I also have this guy right here. This is an old Games Workshop tool for holding small base miniatures. I don't believe they make this exact design anymore, but they sell something similar, and there are other options from third-party companies as well. Also, I've got my 3D printed priming tool that I'll use in a moment. More on that in just a bit here. When it comes to my paints, I use 3 different brands of paints normally. I have Army Painter's War Paint series, I have Games Workshop Citadel line of paints, and I have Cult Crafts line of paints. The reason I have just 3 different brands of paints, it kind of depends on where I was buying paints that day. I don't really care a whole lot about what brand to use. They all work really well for me. And some stores sell one versus the other, blah, blah, blah. So the exact color I use during this process doesn't really matter a whole lot. Just whatever you got that's close enough is going to work pretty well. The first step of painting most miniatures is going to be to apply a simple priming layer. Here I'm using brown from Army Painter's War Paint series. I've got my custom 3D printed priming tool. I sell the STL files for this on my Etsy store, and you can find a link to that in the show notes of this video. Now moving on to the actual painting, our first step is going to take some blood red color. I've got Evisceration from Cult Crafts line of paints, and I want to apply that in between all the details of the raised areas of the miniature, so around the little bumps on its back, and in some of the little depressions and lines that kind of make up the detail of this figure. Now this can be a very quick step. You don't have to worry about screwing things up. You're just kind of applying the color as best as possible. And I should add, only apply this color to the skin areas of the character. Don't apply it to the green armored areas. While that dries, I'm going to apply my base coat to the green armored areas. I'm using a dark green color, which is Caliban Green from Games Workshop Citadel line of paints. And this is a little bit too saturated of a green color for me, so I'm taking some just random gray color and mixing in a little bit to desaturate it. And then I'm going to carefully apply it over all the green armored areas. If you're new to Citadel's paints, Caliban Green is a base color, which means you need to water it down a little bit to get the proper consistency before you apply it to your miniature. Step number 3 in this process is going to be using a light skin tone, and I'm going to dry brush that over the main skin area of the creature. Dry brushing is a technique where you use a very small amount of paint on a crappy brush, and then you end up wiping most of it off on a paper towel. And very carefully you just run the brush lightly across the miniature so that the bristles only make contact with the raised areas. And what this does is apply a very thin amount of paint on these raised areas, and you can kind of apply as many coats as you want to get the desired coverage. It is important that you are using a terrible brush. Dry brushing will destroy the brush, so do not use expensive brushes for this step. If I accidentally covered up some of the visceration, I'm going to go back in with my detail brush and carefully fix that now. And the same applies to the Caliban green armor plating. One thing to note when you're speed painting miniatures is don't get too hung up on trying to fix all your little mistakes. Now we're moving on to a bit of a highlight step of the skin. I'm going to take some white, in this case I've got Honor from Coldcraft's line of paints. I'm going to mix that into the Kislev flesh color to get even a brighter skin tone. And I'm going to apply that to some areas on the miniature. So I'm selectively picking a handful of raised areas in the miniature and applying it there. I am using my detailed brush this time to add the color. Now I've got two more quick detail steps to make things look a little bit more interesting with this miniature. The first one is I'm going to take some white and I'm going to paint each of the claws as well as try to do the best you can with the teeth. The next detail is going to take some brighter green color. I've got Nilith from Coldcraft's line of paints, and I'm going to apply some stripes to the green armored section. The last step to add some contrast to the miniature and kind of have your eye bring out the details a bit better is to add a wash to both the armor and the skin. Now a wash is a very thinned down paint. You can create them on your own or you can also purchase ones that are readily available. If you're new to painting, I would recommend purchasing some that are already pre-made. They work pretty well. For the green section, I've got Beal Tan Green from Games Workshop Citadel line of paints. And for the skin section, I have Flesh Wash from Army Painter's War Paint series. However, if you only got access to GW paints, Seraphim Sepia is a great option as well. Using my detailed brush, I'm going to apply some of the wash to the entirety of that given section. And for the skin, this is going to include the claws and the teeth because that brown wash is going to do some interesting things to the pure white color. And once those two washes dry, they will take a while, maybe 15 minutes or so. You'll have your very own custom painted Marro Puppy Dog. And that brings me to the end of this tutorial. For about 17-ish minutes of work per miniature, I think that looks pretty darn good. I personally like them better than the original ones, but you know, that's obviously a bit biased because I painted them myself. So hopefully you guys found this video interesting and you learned a few things new about speed painting. A lot of the stuff I showed you here can apply to the rest of the Marro as well. I think the only real difference might be some of the metal parts. What you'd want to do is put down a gray base and then maybe dry brush on some silver and a black wash like non-oil from Games Workshop Citadel line of paints. And they would look pretty darn good. So, and before I sign off here, just in case you're wondering, and if you watched the short I put out a little bit ago, hey, weren't you doing a Black Widow paint job here? Yes I am. She's right here. I filmed this tutorial as well as the Heroscape one at the same time, and it just ended up being the Heroscape one was a little bit easier to edit up first. So hit subscribe if you want to see the most famous mech warrior in the history of Battletech and her classic Warhammer right here. That'll probably be the next video coming out in about a week. So until then, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.